Okay, so how this works is it's a conversation.
Hmm.
So it's not trying to demonstrate expertise. It's two pro coaches sitting down. I'm a martini guy. I don't know what you're drinking now. Probably green stuff. And yeah, we're just going to talk about coaching, and the questions are listed, but we may not stick to them. It's just interesting. There's a difference between surrender and succumbing, and so
Uh,
dealing with all of that stuff at this moment in time.
mm.
And I'm creating a new business. I've been in business a little. Just today will be 1 month officially.
Whoa, yay! It's just a
Yeah,
baby. Oh, I can hear it's crying.
in many ways. I want to also bring something else that Jim and I started to talk about wisdom, because it's different. It's different context. It's different to bring wisdom into coaching. So let me tell you a little bit about Shae, by the way. She's a remarkable woman. She works with CEOs and COOs. She is a thought partner. She's able to generate people thinking new thoughts, which allows them to articulate new ways of seeing the world, which gives them a new world to operate in. And I think that's a pretty remarkable skill set, by the way. We have done some work together in various areas. We stay in communication. She doesn't take my shit, which is perfect for me. And she's a brilliant coach. The reason I invited her to this call is she wrote a book called The Blue Pearl. And one of the major themes of it is what does it take to be coachable and win at coaching? And I thought that's a side that we haven't quite looked at yet, and that's what I wanted to talk about. But before we begin, Shae, why don't you introduce yourself to the audience, and then we'll hop into this thing.
Okay. Well, I've been involved with coaching since I was knee-high to a grasshopper. I
Oh, by
actually
the way, I should say she's Canadian, so she will use Canadian expressions.
If you don't understand them, I can translate. Since I was very young, I started life as a performer, and then eventually became involved in business communications, marketing, and all the way through, I was being coached by speech coaches, by voice coaches, by marketing coaches. And then I met Jim Selman, who started teaching me about ontological coaching and leadership development. And that brought me into the world that I'm in today.
You use the word ontological.
Yeah.
I also define myself sometimes as an ontologic. It's actually can't. That's not a word. Ontological. You have to add the AL to be correct.
Yep.
Ontological coaching. Um, what do you mean by that?
So that's coaching to a person's way of being. And for me, that's really about coaching the possibility that they are, which comes back to my title. The title of my book, why I called it The Blue Pearl, is that in certain spiritual traditions, at the moment just before enlightenment, it's reported that they see like a blue light, which is in the shape of a pearl. And that blue light represents pure possibility of everything. And so when we're coaching to a person's way of being, we're seeing not just the person who's in front of us, but we're seeing the pure potential. We're seeing the blue pearl that they are.
There's a wonderful author, Miles Downey, you may know about. He wrote the book Effective Coaching, and he said the job of a coach is to convert potential into performance. And this is on the same lines. It's to convert possibility into being. So when people talk to you about coaching, how do you define it? How do you describe it? How do you distinguish it for people?
I say that it's a co-creative relationship. It's a relationship that we create together, and we're constantly creating it. And it's a collaboration for fulfilling whatever it is that the coachee is committed to. So I, as a coach, I have to be committed to their commitments. If I can't authentically commit to what they're up to in the world, then I shouldn't be coaching them.
So that would differ than being a mentor or an advisor. And how would you distinguish the two?
Significantly. I see when you're coaching someone, when I'm coaching someone, I believe that that person is ready to play the game that they want to play. If I'm advising them or mentoring them, they don't necessarily have to be ready for the game, fully ready for the game. They may be partially ready for the game. If I'm advising, I'm kind of telling them, looking at this in my expert opinion, I think you would be well advised to do blah, blah, blah. If I'm mentoring them, then I'm usually sharing kind of, well, you know, I've been in a similar situation to that, and, you know, something like this might work in your situation if there's some similarities.
The distinction for me, advice is just that. It's information trying to be relayed to someone and hope that they understand what they're hearing, which they may, actually I say, in advice they listen but do not hear. That's one. And in mentoring, what I'm trying to do is have them move through the apprentice, journeyman, master skill set, whatever skill set I've got. I want to mentor them to do that. It has nothing to do with it has something to do with who they be, but more about what they do. So advice is about what they know, mentoring is about what they do, but what you pointed to, which is really what I believe is accurate, is coaching is about who they be. You know, who are you, and how? Because you change that, you change not only them, you change how they see the field. You did a really brilliant job in your book about how a player needs to what does a player need to bring to the coaching relationship in order for the whole relationship to be successful and for the player to be successful.
Right. That was something that was intriguing to me personally, and that's partly why I wrote the book. I was seeing, people working with executive coaches and not having a sense of what they needed to bring to the table, and just kind of sitting there and listening to the coaches as if they were advisors. So they were missing a lot of value in the coaching. So what I discovered in interviewing masterful coaches and their clients was that there are some foundational pieces that if they're not there, the coaching relationship will not work. And so on the player side, the coachee side, there are things like being a request for coaching, being a genuine request. I really want to be coached, not I want therapy, not I want advice. I want to be led to what the right answers are. The person needs to be really ready to be curious, to learn, to engage with whatever ideas the coach brings forth, and to try on different ways of being and doing the things that they're doing.
Request for coaching is a pretty formal statement. If people don't quite understand what coaching is, and you're trying to discern if the term I use, is this person coachable? What do you look for in that initial interaction to say, hey, that they are a request for coaching? They would probably use those words. What is present in that interaction?
There has to be a need for the coaching, first of all. So there has to be some domain in their life where there's a gap between what they intend and what their results are. And they can't close that gap on their own. And so they're looking for help in doing that. If there is no gap to be closed, if their intentions and the results are totally in sync, then there's no need for coaching. There's no request there.
I also look for, what have they done to try to close that gap historically? Because then I can see something about the way they operate in the world. Are they grasping at straws? Do they have an understanding of the distinction between coaching, mentoring, rescuer? Because coaches don't rescue. That's not their job. I listen for, can they hear? can they hear it? Can they hear because when you coach, and you've done this for me as well, and you coach from the inside out. You can't coach from the outside in, and that's what mentors and advisors do. So what else have you noticed in that initial conversation with people?
Well, before I even go there, I'm listening and paying attention to whether they are actually game ready, as in, would there be another modality that might be more appropriate for them at this point? Because quite often people will come to a coach when what they actually need is a therapist, where they need someone to remedy a trauma that's occurred in the past, or to deal with something that needs healing. And so the therapist modality is more about fixing. That's definitely not what coaching is about. And so I'm listening to be really clear about that. Now, that doesn't always show up in the initial conversation. Sometimes it's further in during the honeymoon phase, the first 90 days, where you realize that, the coachee has some trauma that they really need healed before they can move forward.
The other piece that, for me, that I listen for is the person willing to be responsible. That it isn't about them or it or competition or any of that. If there's blame or guilt or even, and what you're talking about is shame, that's not coachable stuff, because that's not going to improve until they're responsible. They can't make a change. How can a customer assess the quality of a coach when they first start? Because there's a lot of coaches out there now.
That partly happens in that discovery, that initial conversation period, but and there are many certification bodies now. There are many people hanging out a shingle saying that they're a coach and they have a certificate. The certificate doesn't necessarily, like you said, guarantee that you are going to get the coaching that you need from this particular person. So when you meet a coach, you want to be listening for, are they telling me what to do, or are they asking me questions and inviting me to reflect and to think and to inquire? Are they asking me to break old habits and telling me that's what I should do? Or are they actually talking about inventing new habits, as in what would support the game that I'm playing? Are they paying attention to my mood? Are they really deeply listening to me? Or are they providing me with a bunch of tools that they've given to hundreds of people before and telling me, this has worked with millions of people before and you too should use them? That's not the kind of coaching that is valuable.
What is so special about a coaching-player relationship?
I think that it's really what happens in the space between us. And a lot of us don't think about that space. I call it the fantastic space. That's where the magic happens, where the coach is relating not just to me as I am right now, but to who I could become or who I'm choosing to become. And in the same way, I'm relating to the coach. If I'm the coachee, I'm relating to the coach, and I'm committed to them winning at coaching me. And that's a really unique kind of interdependent commitment, responsibility, and seeing each other fully. That doesn't happen in a lot of relationships these days.
I would say it a slightly different way. What I tend to do as a coach is to speak to their highest thought of themselves and see how they respond. What difference, if any, are there between working with an internal coach, one inside your organization, and an external coach?
And that showed up in my research. It was really intriguing because I interviewed a mix of coaches who just work one-on-one with people, never get involved in organizations and organizational coaching, and coaches who coach teams and coach individuals, but the organization is paying for the coaching. And what showed up was that for people who are working with an internal coach, there are actually limitations to where you can go in the coaching. So inside of an organization, if the coach is inside the organization, as in they are employed by the organization and they are coaching their colleagues inside of the organization, they are all inside the same culture. And so the coach will inevitably have blind spots about the organizational culture, which they will not be able to see. And so that will be a limitation on the coaching. Also, that coach will be influenced by the hierarchy, the organizational dynamics, the politics, and the relationship between their role as a coach in the organization and the role of whoever it is that they're coaching. So yes, there is definitely an influence on working with an internal coach. An external coach, on the other hand, is somebody who is not inside the organization. They have their own practice outside of the organization. They may have been hired by the company, or they may have been hired by the individual for the coaching. They, being on the outside, will be able to see the organizational culture through the eyes of their coachee and speak to that and bring that into the coaching. And also they will not be as influenced by the role dynamics, personalities, and potentially history that's happened between the coachee and various people that they need to work with.
The research that you did for the Blue Pearl, because it was remarkable, because Brene Brown and you, this is the way I look at it. I mean, do huge amounts of research before you speak. For me, I just speak, so you have to be, careful about me. But you did that. You really, how many people did you interview, and how did you gather your data before you published the book?
Well, I started by just reaching out initially to the network of coaches that I already knew and asking them if they would be willing to be interviewed, and then if they would be willing to invite one of their clients to be interviewed as well, so that I was always speaking with a coachee and having spoken with their coach. So I would see both sides of the same relationship. I interviewed over 100 coaches and their clients. And that was a process of, listening to them, transcribing what the interviews revealed, and then sitting down with all of the data and trying to figure out, okay, where are the common threads? And, what is it that brings people to coaching, first of all? Are there common threads there? And then what works inside of the coaching relationship?
So what are the threads?
So there are basically just a handful of reasons that people come to coaching, although those might get evidenced with different situations around them. And it has something to do with what they care about. So something that they care about is not getting taken care of. So either they're in a crisis, or they have a dilemma, or they're in a transition and they just don't know, they know they're in a transition, but they just don't know how to navigate it. And what happens is they have enough desire to resolve that uncomfortableness of being in the crisis, the dilemma, or the transition. They're willing to stay with that and work through it. If they're not willing to, if they want to just coast their way through the dilemma, that's okay, but they won't be an opening for coaching.
What's the common thread that has the coaching-player relationship work?
For both players, commitment and responsibility. Without commitment and responsibility, the relationship will not work. And there's something else, though, that's present there in that fantastic space that I talked about, and that is love. And I know people may not talk about it very much, especially in these days of Me Too, but I'm not talking about eros, I'm talking about agape, that kind of love where you care about the person, you genuinely do. So if that's present, it adds a depth, and I think it's part of what creates the possibility of transformation happening for the coachee.
Who does a coach need to be able to bring all of what we spoke about in the last half hour to the relationship?
I think the really masterful coaches really have done their own work on what it is to be a human being, not a human doing.